I suppose they call them life-changing experiences for a reason. Those moments in your life, whether expected or unexpected, that completely change the trajectory of your path, but also very likely change you at the deepest level. And that's definitely what happened to me and many other people here on Maui on August 8th. And today in this episode, I want to share about my experience and also offer hopefully some gentle reminders that might be helpful for you if you experience a tough time. Hopefully, nothing at the level of what we experienced here on that fateful day, but we all experience moments that totally throw us off our game, and having the tools to navigate them ahead of time is so helpful. So, I've been thinking about recording this episode for a while, and I've been putting it off because I know it's an emotional one, but I decided that today would be the day. And it's interesting because today's actually the second time since August 8th that I've been to Lahaina. And I will go there multiple times a week because most of my business was over there. Most of my work was over there. And I haven't been back on my own since. And today I went, and I will tell you the drive over there was very emotional, and it's really, really challenging to be over there. I'm sure you've seen photos and videos in social media, but the energy of it is not captured in those clips or the photos. So August 8th started out like a normal Tuesday for me, except that it was already really stormy that day. There was already the Kula upcountry fire that was burning. So we were aware of a situation. As I was driving to work, which was normally, about a 45-minute drive, I'm driving on a road that there was already trees down. The wind was so intense, the car was rattling, and I literally thought to myself, if a storm like this happens again, I'm calling out. It's not worth this drive. It's scary. And as I drove in towards Lahaina town, what would eventually become the main Lahaina fire had already started up the hill a little bit from the main area of Lahaina. So there was fire trucks, there was already traffic, there was already lights that were down, power that was out. And so I'm driving into work to the yoga session, which I did every Tuesday morning. And I was late, because the traffic was crazy. And I got there and I told the guests, I think you should, if you can just stay at the hotel today, that would be for the best. I don't know, the traffic's pretty crazy and it's already a bit of a mess. And so the whole time we're teaching, it's still crazy windy, palm fronds flying. They probably should have canceled the class, but they didn't. And all we could hear was sirens. And then I finished the class, and my clients, whom I normally would see on Tuesday, they canceled their session. One of my clients was worried about the wind. He said it was so crazy overnight that he thought the roof was going to fly off their house. That's the level of wind we were talking about at that day. And so I left the hotel, and a drive from the hotel to get onto the main bypass to get back towards my house, a drive that normally would take about 8 or 10 minutes, was 3 hours of stop and go traffic. And I we had no idea of the severity of what would happen that afternoon, but everything was backed up. It was gridlock. People were getting frustrated. The wind was still so crazy that at one point I took one of my yoga blankets, I put my window down on my driver's side, and I put the yoga blanket there and I tucked it into the window, and I put the window up because I thought there's coconuts flying everywhere and palm fronds and things. And I thought if something hits the window, that's no good. And luckily, it was stop and go such a long time. I had enough gas, but normally I'm kind of one that didn't really like keep my gas tank filled up. Side lesson, always make sure. And having food and water in your car, also important. And so I remember finally getting on the highway and just feeling like, oh, I can go home. And I was so exhausted from the whole drive. It was so stressful. And I got home at about 12 o'clock, and I was just so exhausted that I slept. And then woke up in the afternoon to news that the fire was spreading, and obviously we know what happened, but realization of the next day and realization of where I was today was the roads that I was on in that 3 hours of the stop and go traffic were engulfed on either side with the flames. And so I'm really fortunate that I made it home that day. And that's what really sitting there today and being over there and through these last few months, it's come back to me over and over of a deep, deep gratitude and appreciation. Obviously, coupled with a deep grief and sadness that people around the world and especially people here felt at your deepest core, and so many of our family members and our community members here that were touched very closely with loss of their homes, family members, loved ones, pets, livelihood, businesses, like, our lives changed forever on that day. And initially, it was and still is so much shock. And so what I wanted to talk about today was when you have moments that shake you to your core, how they can become an opportunity of deep transformation. And it's not an instant process by any means, right? For those of you that have lost someone or lost a pet or a relationship or anything that has really just torn you apart, we know that it takes time. And that's really the first thing is to be compassionate. Be compassionate with yourself, be compassionate with the process, with people around you. Like when we're in that deep, tender experience of a loss, it's really challenging in so many different ways. And one of the tools that I really began to lean in on was a practice that I learned because in the moment, we all felt so helpless and we all felt the deep loss. And so, of course, there was definitely a springing into action. And I'm sure you saw that. And so that's another one of the tools is to have that connection because that's actually one of the most pure methods of regulating our nervous system when we experience a highly stressful event or potentially traumatic event is connection, is that eye to eye, face to face contact and physical contact. And so when that feels right to you, being able to connect with people, reach out. And so it's beautiful when you think about, in the Jewish tradition, after someone passes away, the family sits together and they sit together for an extended period. And that's a time to just be around. You don't necessarily know what to say or it's hard to find the words, when someone's grieving, it's really challenging. And so sometimes we avoid it, right? Because it's just awkward and you want to make them feel better, but you don't know what to say. And honestly, saying that it means a lot sometimes, right? Because when you feel strong enough to reach out or to stay connected or be connected, it really is so key for your emotional ability to handle that situation. And so, for us, that was springing into action. Like, how can we help our community members here? What can we do? And you saw, I'm sure, that people were literally like flying in, boating in, getting over there. And so that community connection was so potent. And so, for yourself, when you're in those moments, just to have that lifeline of someone that you can reach out to and do your best because, you'll start to see, and I definitely saw my patterns, and my patterns are either to spring into action, which it did, or to shut down completely and isolate. And so, in these moments when we're really being pressurized, when we are at our peak of intensity of what we're dealing with, our habits come up, right? And so just know that about yourself is that in those moments, if you have a tendency to shut down and isolate, then that tends to be what we do. And so if you know anyone that that that's their tendency and they're going through a challenging time, don't wait for them to reach out to you. Because if they're a strong person, they probably won't. And so for me, that level of connection that came from people that I didn't even, people I've know through the internet, through business networking groups or family members, and people that were reaching out to me, and some people I had never even really talked to just because they knew I lived on Maui, they were reaching out, and like that means so much. And so, when you know someone else that's having a hard time, just do your best and just a little something, and even if you don't know what to say, just like, I'm loving you today. I'm here if you need anything. It's simple, but yet we kind of avoid it because it's awkward. And so, really, that's the first lesson I wanted to start with, is that having that lifeline of connection and having that support in whatever that looks like for you, especially if you know that you tend to withdraw, and especially when it's an intense, sad experience, right? Like we all go through grief and sadness in different ways, and there's no comparing, and there's no right or wrong, but it's a very tender process. And so, just observing yourself and being compassionate. So that's the second one, is how can we be compassionate? How can we hold ourselves in these moments? And so where I was going to earlier was at the beginning of it, as so many of us did, out of necessity and out of need and out of desire to help. And so we really jumped into these different roles. And so initially I jumped in, and we were doing volunteer work and helping to create and to prepare food for the first responders. And then, I thought, well, what else can I do? I felt so helpless. And that's another thing, is when somebody else is going through it and we feel helpless, we don't know what to say, we don't know what to do, all of that. And so just really sitting back, and even just, they won't necessarily know either, because when you're shattered, you can't tell up from down, and you're like, don't even want to eat, and you can't even move and all of that. And so being willing to take that step forward and say, I brought you some food. Here's some really yummy drinks that I know you like, or whatever it is, and just that, taking that step forward, because honestly it means the world to somebody that's in deep loss, right? Because we're traumatized. And that's the truth of it, is that we all have trauma to varying degrees, and especially when we go through a very intense experience, it's there, and our brain is in survival mode. It can't really think straight other than just handling what's at right in front of them, because literally your pupils get narrow, and you're really singularity of focus, and it's not easy for us to really think about all these other things. It's like in the moment only, and that's it. So one of the things that I did in the, like, I don't know what to do, is I created a fundraiser, and we were able to raise over $5,000, and everyone that donated got Wake the Warrior Within, which is one of my yoga series online. And so that to me felt like another way to help, but it was also my tendency of, I don't know what to do. I'm going to do something, and like go into hyperactive overdrive. And, that was my fight response, right? Because when we're in stress like this, we all respond in a slightly different way, but there's commonalities based on the human nervous system. So I was like, all right, let's take action, and was going after it that way. And so I really, even though I was doing all that, when I sat down and I stopped and I realized, shit, like, I was so shattered, and I was exhausted. I literally was exhausted. And I had just released my first book, The Warrior's Journey, and done the book club and released a new program. And I was just like, I am actually exhausted. And it was an opportunity, and actually not an opportunity, it was a forced rest. I was made to stop because of what happened, because everything on Maui stopped and shifted, and my business, which was mostly on the west side, I couldn't go over there, and I, out of respect, didn't want to go over there, and my clients weren't ready for it. And so everything stopped. And I realized that I was completely exhausted, and that, like, I needed to stop. And so luckily I have a dear friend of mine, Matt, who suggested, take this time. It's important for you to be in this process, this unfolding process that's happening right now. And, because he knew about me, because he is one too, but he knows that I'm a hyperachiever, that I just keep going. I can't, it's challenging for me to stop. And so that's my main saboteur, the way that I handle, stressful situations. And we all have these patterns, right? And so I started reading a book called When Things Fall Apart by Pema Chandran. And it was so potent. And so in that book, she talks a lot about loss and grief and trauma, and says that when we are in a situation like that, that it takes us to a very tender place in our heart that the Buddhists call the bodhicitta, and it means the awakened heart, that we can only experience in those very tender moments. And so it's an opportunity for us to really dive deep into that wisdom and the guidance of the heart. And that's it's potent, right? And a lot of different wisdom traditions and communities and people around the world really honor that, right? Because when we're in grief, we're in such a deep state of presence, and it might feel like nothing else matters because of what has happened or what happened before or what is to come, because we're in just such this raw vulnerability. And so one of the practices in there was really potent for me is called Tong Len. And so when we're in a really deep, guttural, visceral, traumatic experience, or even more subtle, right? If we have a frustration or we're angry or, we have a I don't know, a challenging moment in our business or whatever, and we're feeling a way that we don't like, right? That's not one of our North Star emotions, or that's really freaking hard. So the Tonglen process is dropping into the present moment and really connecting to the vastness of all of life. Of, imagine that you're in front of the ocean and you can see how massive and big it is, or you can see the openness of a starry night sky, and we see the vastness and we know that there's this continuum. And so with the Tonglen practice, you breathe in. And so say you're breathing in grief, and you ask yourself, well, what is a feeling that would feel like healing or feel more expansive to me? And it's not necessarily, when we're in the depths of grief or in struggle or suffering, it's not going to be joyous ecstasy by any means. It might just be peace. It might be a softness or whatever it is, something that allows you to be able to just begin to release some of it. So as you let it come through, you feel that emotion as you breathe in. And when you breathe out, you allow yourself to sit in the energy, whatever emotion that feels that it would be mildly more supportive or more supportive. And so what you're doing is you're transmuting that. So what I would breathe in the grief and I would breathe out peace. And I would do that for the people of Lahaina, people of Kula, the people that were directly affected, indirectly affected, the people of Maui. And so breathing it in and then feeling the peace. And it just allows this movement, right? And it's a compassion, it's a softness. So it takes us into that really gentle place of being willing to feel our feelings, because most humans avoid that, right? And especially if we are high performers or we're hyperachievers, we tend to try to bypass that because it's uncomfortable, right? Because it means that we are human and we all have emotions, but avoiding them isn't very productive. And so that was the second piece, is to be gentle and to be compassionate. And sometimes we have no choice because we literally have nothing else in us. And so that's what we get to do, is just to be in the moment, to be in the moment. And so for me, that really kickstarted a curiosity of learning more about what happens when we go through these really traumatic experiences. And I started to explore more about what happens in our body, and specifically in our nervous system, because when we start to understand that anything that's too much, too fast, too soon is impactful on the nervous system and therefore is categorized as trauma, right? And there's obviously a scale of that, a significant scale, but it's all individual. We can't compare, we can't judge, we can't say that's more, it is what it is. It's an individual experience because it's all based on our own subconscious programs and patterns and our thoughts. And we each have an individual experience. Each one of us has a lens that we tell the story through, right? And so that's where I started to explore that. And I started to understand more and more that, the life that we are all living, there's stressors and there's very intense survival moments. And hopefully you haven't experienced ones that have been quite big T traumatic, but I'm sure there's been moments that rocked you, right? Moments that shifted you. And so it really became obvious to me that the most important thing that we get to do and learn about is our true self. And that's our nervous system, the subtle energy system of the body that's constantly interacting with your surroundings, constantly aware of all of the ongoings inside your body. And so, yet, we're not really aware of it until we start to learn about this stuff, but it's affecting everything. It affects your success. It affects your thoughts. It affects your energy. It affects your ability to sleep well, to handle challenging situations, to be playful, to rise to the challenge. It affects everything. But when we are in this constant state of dysregulation, which is just an ongoing survival stress in our being, and not able to come back to connected awareness, come back to this place of peacefulness within ourselves, this stay in play state, not just in the fight or flight, right? Because our body is reacting the same way it did when it was wired originally many, many years ago, as though everything is stressful. But our stresses aren't dinosaurs and saber-toothed tigers. Our stresses are traffic jams and algorithms. But our body responds the same way. And say you're in the middle of a launch and you're just going, 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 and you're fight or flight. It's no wonder to me that not only do they potentially leave us feeling exhausted and defeated and depleted at the end, because we go into shutdown because your body's like, I can't handle this anymore. I need a break. And then it's a forced rest. So that's why one of the tools we use in the mindful strength method are power pauses. Because when you can come back to a state of regulation, which isn't calm, right? A healthy nervous system isn't necessarily calm all the time, because we get to be able to rise to the challenge, obviously, whatever that challenge is, in varying levels of intensity and challenge, to be able to handle it and then come back to that steady state and not necessarily freeze and shut down or go into people pleasing, which is fawn, right? And so we have the fight, flight, freeze, fawn. So the fight is taking action, going for it. The flight is the get me the hell out of here, which of course at times is absolutely essential to the survival, right? Or it's avoiding and procrastination and avoiding the awkward conversation, right? So think of it in these different situations. And then the freeze is, I don't know what to do. I don't know what to say. I don't know what to do. And that complete shutdown. Whereas the fun is people pleasing and overgiving, overdoing, overworking, overthinking. And so we all have these, like it's a continuum, right? And we may, you may notice already your different mechanisms of handling it. And of course it, in some situations it's going to pull a different part of you out, but we can see pretty consistently how we handle challenges throughout our lives. And so it's just, again, it's that compassionate, loving awareness. And when we learn about ourselves and we learn about these patterns, we can witness ourselves in the moments and begin to come back to that center, right? Because our ideal state is stay and play. And so that's where we are in that playful, effervescent energy of the more activated part of our nervous system, right? A more sympathetic state, but you're still really centered and grounded and aware. So there is that parasympathetic, which is the slowing and the calming and the grounding, right? So it's a balance, it's a dance, right? We want to go up, 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 and then be able to come down without crashing. And so what I started to really recognize as I learned more about trauma was that on a very small scale, on a little t level, that I had pushed myself through my business and specifically in launch situations, and they were traumatic for me because at the end of it, I was so flat out and burnt out and bummed out and worn out and exhausted that I crashed into a freeze state and I withdrew completely. And so that happens, right? That happens when we get into that completely depleted state. And whether that's because of a really intense event or just we run ourselves ragged, candle burning all the ends, and we get to that place where your body just forces a rest. And so learning more about that and realizing, okay, this is really important information and it's potent, and it has very practical applications as humans. But also it has translations into the business world, especially in online business where you're doing online launches or promotions or mini launches or whatever you want to call them, is that it's really important for you to be aware of the impact of your nervous system on everything, because your energetic system, your nervous system, your inner state, whether you're feeling stay and play, whether you're worn out and depleted, or you're stressed out and you're frantic and frazzled, and you're in that like red zone and you're going, 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 that will directly impact your thoughts, which then impact your emotions, which then impact your actions and your results, right? So a lot of people talk about that formula of reality creation. Thoughts lead to emotions, emotions lead to actions, actions lead to results. But a lot of people don't include that essential undertone of the nervous system that impacts and supports all of that. And so running with a dysregulated nervous system, which I 100% did for a really long time, and still it happens to all of us, that will directly impact your anxiety level, your sadness, your OCD, your ADD, your ADHD. And so it's so important to have these practices that slow us down and bring us to stillness, that cultivate this deep connection with your inner energetics. Because if we're running in this dysregulated state, whether it's freeze or fawn or fight or flight, and it's causing that anxiety, right? It's pushing us into anxiety overdrive and in the go, go, go. And we're stressed. When we're stressed is when we're more likely to default to these subconscious patterns and programs that we learned as children, right? That were modeled for us as children, that have become our operating system as adults, until we do the work of shifting that. Because when you were a kid, when something was stressful in your family, what were you shown to do? Were you shown to power through and make it happen? Or were in your family, was it like, oh no, don't talk about that and avoid it? Or maybe it was to blame other people and say, it's their fault, and we got to write a letter about it, and all of those things. So just really thinking about, what was modeled as children, because that's what's hardwired into your brain as the default go to handling patterns in stressful situations. And some people say that those things that we were modeled, they were because we were a child and we were trying to do our best and we're learning. They can be, trauma responses. And so as adults, those trauma responses, we've practiced them so much, they become part of our personality, right? Like that, I'm just going to go help. I'm going to solve this right now. I'm going to fix this. I'm going to do something, or, oh no, I'm going to shut down. I'm not even going to be any part of this. And so again, that's where that compassionate curiosity comes in. Compassionate curiosity. And so that really leads me to the last reminder and loving encouragement, hopefully, is that when something happens, maybe you lose a pet or a job, and it literally just feels like everything is shattered. I told my therapist it felt a few weeks ago that I finally felt like a disco ball. And she said, tell me more. And I said, after it happened, I felt like the the mirror that was my life shattered, and everything was around me in pieces. And I feel like it was coming back together. And so there will be a point, and I know this is, especially if you're in the thick of it and it's like you're in that deep, raw forest of grief, that grief that is a reflection of how much you love that person or how much that meant to you. That's what grief is. It's a direct reflection of the depth of the love that you experienced. And so when you're in that moment that everything is shattered, it's an opportunity to cultivate just that patience and the curiosity and the compassion, so that we can come back to that connection to yourself. And for me, what it was a realization that, and as it is for many of us when we go through grief and we are in that raw, tender bodhicitta, and it's like, what even matters? What even matters? What am I doing? And we have all of these questions. And so it's really an opportunity to begin to cultivate a new expression of yourself once it feels like the pieces are coming back together. And by no means is that an overnight process. And it's, pieces fall off and we bring them back. And it takes time. It takes time. But what can you begin to cultivate? And the life-changing experience, it changes us at our deepest core. And for me, it was a realization, and bless its heart, because it was a fun program at the time, but I realized that booty boost wasn't the direction I wanted to continue in. Because yes, I know there's technical importance of having a strong and active backside because gluteal amnesia is a real thing because we all sit on the damn thing so much. And it's causing postural issues, weight gain, hypertension, high blood pressure, diabetes, stress, all the stuff that comes from weak posture. But it just didn't feel like my path because toning and tightening your tushy, it's a cute little alliteration. I love myself some alliterations, but it just felt a bit empty. And that's not to say that my work still doesn't do all of that because it does, but that's not the focus because I realized that in order for us to truly be sustainably successful and holistically successful in that you're thriving in all areas of your life, the foundation of all of that is the inner work of nervous system regulation and healing and beginning to update the operating system of the mind so that we can cultivate that inner presence and that connected awareness so we can take control of the mind and come back to a place of center within ourselves so that we have that resiliency, right? In my book I talk about bounce back ability, and that's it, is our ability to bounce back from these challenges. And sometimes, it's like we throw the ball at the wall and it splats, but then it falls and then it bounces, and so it takes time. And by no means is there any sort of timeline for any of this because especially when it's so raw and so new, it really is undescribable the shifts that can happen when we experience tough times, deep loss, trauma, whatever it is, right? And so what it helped me to realize is that again, I saw my tendency of wanting to just throw it all into the wind and start over, but thankfully Matt, my friend, my coach said, let's take a look at this and let's figure out what this really means for you. And he helped me to really see the depth of the work that I get to do and how I get to support people, and how by overcoming my own high functioning anxiety and learning to work with my anxiety overdrive, my tendency to go, 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 and then crash, and recognizing that all along I've been using these tools. Now I can begin to really cultivate a journey to support other purpose-driven entrepreneurs to overcome their own anxiety and their own stress and be truly, truly thriving at the deepest level of the mind and the body by way of the nervous system, because the mind-body connection is through the nervous system, is through the vagus nerve. And so what I really began to cultivate was this new pathway. And it was so beautiful because that's where mindful strength emerged. And mindful strength is really built on three pillars of the inner shift. So the deep inner shifting of that dialogue, recognizing your self-sabotaging patterns and habits and beginning to shift them. And that's the foundation of everything. And it's not exclusively mindset work. It's actually literally learning how, and it's actually simple, to rewire your mind using these powerful tools from the mental fitness practice. So you're developing mental strength, which then, of course, develops emotional intelligence, well-being, fortitude of focus, ability to cultivate calm confidence in any situation. That's what comes from mental fitness. And it's really learning to control your mind, learning to cultivate these routines and rituals that support that so that you are starting the day with intention and really aligning to your vision, having a big vision that's pulling you forward, right? Rather than repeating the frustrating patterns and pains of the past, and learning that, starting the day and ending the day with these intentional moments with yourself, that's the potency, because that's what we're here to do. You're here to be thriving and be happy and healthy. And yes, these beautiful dreams and intentions and goals that you have are so beautiful and they're potent, but they require you. Yet we are taught that this like go, 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 push it, and you can sleep later, and like just moving yourself through it, this healthy and insanely fast paced. That's what we're shown and modeled to be successful. That's not necessarily it. If you look at it from a holistic success point of view. So that first pillar of the inner shifts, and then combining that with the work that I do as a personal trainer and having the outer shifts of keeping your other 600 muscles strong and healthy and toned. So you're feeling good, you're feeling strong, you're feeling sexy, you're feeling confident, you're feeling energized, eating to fuel your mental health. So we look at bringing in these really healthy foods and healthy eating habits because most of the chemicals in your brain, the neurotransmitters and the neurochemicals, they actually are made in your belly, in your gut. And in order to be thriving at an emotional health level and a mental health level, it takes really simple things. Gut health is so potent, but integrating that into your mindful eating practices and then really learning to pause. Because if we don't take breaks, your body will make you. And Earl Grey said, if you don't make time for wellness, you'll be destined to make time for illness. And power pauses are one of the tools we use in mindful strength because they are the most effective way to stay in alignment with your vision and achieve your goals without exhausting yourself. And that can be, impact goals, income goals, creativity goals, relationship goals, whatever it is, but to stay in alignment with your vision and achieve those goals. And so that's the outer shifts. And then of course it's beyond because you are an energetic being, right? And integrating the philosophies of yoga that, there's so many different energy centers in your body and that we want to continually refresh this energy so that we're not having these, samskaras, these old patterns inside of us, having these emotional residue of past experiences that then repeat themselves, right? And so clearing your energy at a deep level and beginning to really shift how you see yourself because the stories we tell ourselves will create our reality and we create our reality based on the future we're living in today. And so learning to see yourself through these fresh eyes, learning to cultivate this new mind, this new way of being that really supports your vision, supports your goals, helps you to move in that direction. That's really key. And of course, all of that is supported by regulation of your nervous system. So it really helped me to bring together all of these different tools and really truly cultivate this new experience for myself and for my clients and for my community and to be able to share these. And so it really did turn into a completely new direction and really revived my purpose and my commitment to elevating the energy of the planet by helping people to prioritize their health and happiness. And so that you can truly thrive and be holistically healthy and sustainably successful and really happy, a happy human. That's really what it comes down to is feeling good. And yes, building a better booty in the process, of course. Yes, there's that and all of that. But the deep shifts, that's really the vision that I have for this work. And so it really helped me to learn and witness all of that. And, by no means it took weeks and months to and even going back there today, as I was driving over there today, I was so grateful that it was a calm day. But I was using all the tools. I was tapping, I was chanting, I was breathing, I was crying. Yeah, it's raw, right? And that's the thing is that it never really goes away. It's we learn to navigate the grief and we learn to witness ourselves, love ourselves, and prime ourselves to be able to navigate those challenging situations. But when we learn about ourselves, when we know better, the next time we can do better. And I was ready to do it because I tried to do that, a few months ago and it was crazy windy that day. And I got halfway there and I freaked out. I had a meltdown. I couldn't do it because it was too raw and I was unsupported in that moment because I wasn't at this place. And, time, knowing, love, therapy, support, exercise, somatic stuff, breath work, whatever it is that helps you to get there, it's all part of the journey. It's all part of the journey. So I hope that these gentle reminders for tough times would be helpful for you. And I hope there was at least a little glimmer. And that's one of the other things I learned about, the polyvagal theory and nervous system work is to look for these little glimmers and these little moments, and being able to see the little the bright lights, and sometimes they're just little sparks, and maybe it's the little wiggle of your tails, your tail, of the tail of the furry friend right beside you here on the ground, or maybe it's a loving friend that reaches out to you, or whatever it is finding these glimmers that we can begin to look for, because there will be triggers as well, but that's the balance to that, and there's a balance in everything, right? And that's we get to love, we get to experience, and at times we will lose things, and things will be taken away, and life will change, and it's really, there's no linear path to anything. And in entrepreneurship and growth and personal development, it's like more like this. Or the unalome, like the Buddhists have. Where is it? There we go. We think it's going to be straight, but it's zigzag, zigzag, twirl. And so it's it's a lot. But I hope that this gave you some tools to lean into and to use. I hope it was helpful for you. And I would love to invite you, if you feel like you would like to do an audit of your own mindful strength, of those different pillars and categories of how you are living in these 9 different areas of your life, and you'd love to get a bit more guidance and a roadmap on that, then I will put a link in the show notes for you to book your mindful strength audit, and we can have a call together, totally free, and where you can get some insight into these 9 key important areas in your life and learn a little bit more about yourself, because you're amazing. And I would love for you to learn more. And I'd love to be able to share that information with you. So the link to book that, if you'd like one, totally free, no pressure, all good. Just have a little tea time and get a little mindful strength audit, is going to be in the show notes or the comments. And so until next time, sending you so much love and peace as you navigate the daily moments of life, and really thanking you for taking and making the time to live and move and show up on purpose as the purposeful powerhouse that you truly are. And I know there will be moments when you feel like the farthest thing from a powerhouse, but just know that in those moments, we are holding you. And in those moments is your capacity to deeply be connected and curious and compassionate and cultivate more knowing, more love, more opportunity for growth and healing, by being willing to just be in it and get the support that you need. Reach out, get therapy, call the helplines, whatever it is, because we all need help. And that's the thing, too. One last lesson is people want to help. And that's our nature, is to support each other. And so, you know, reaching out to your loved ones, connecting, and just know that there's a beautiful community here loving you, supporting you. And I'm here if you want to talk, if you have questions, and see you next time. And until then, sending you so much love, aloha, and compassion and joy from the beautiful island of Maui. Take care. Bye bye.